All right, so on here I have underpaintings done for this apple. So I'm looking at the core of the shadow, the darkest part of the shadow, and I have some purples in there. And if I look at the undercoloring of this red apple, I see some greens and some oranges, and I can build those up by starting with really watery washes and letting them dry before I go over the top of them. And then this apple is this one. So again, that kind of bitten area. This is definitely going to be more orange when it's finished. This is going to be more red, more of a yellow orange over here where it's bitten. But again, just starting to tone the papers down a little bit. So next I'm going to work on this one. Right here. Best spot for it. This is going to be my swatch paper so I can test my colors before I use them on here. And I don't have a whole lot more room on my screen here, but I'm going to try to mix my colors into my palette. I'm not going to use any colors straight out of here. I'm going to mix everything and change it just a little bit. So if I wanted to start with here, I could probably get some yellowy greens and use those here and here and here before I went back in with some more kind of orange and warmer tones over the top. So yellow's weak. I'm going to start with the weaker color, add some water to it, get that off my brush, kind of squeeze that paint out of my brush. I obviously had a slightly contaminated brush already because that color is already not that pure yellow that you would see out of the container. So it's a little bit muted, which is fine. And then I'm going to add a little bit of greens to it. Just a little tiny bit more. I don't want to add too much there. I'm going to clean my brush so I don't get that any more green into there. That was enough. So now I have this watery, see-through green color, and I can, in a very controlled manner, my brush is a dry brush now, you can tell because if I spread out the bristles, they stay spread out. Or I could use an all-purpose brush, which is more like this, and then it's not going to spread out as easily, just a little bit, but either way you can tell the brushes are dry. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of paint, and the bristles immediately go back together once they have some moisture on them. And I can paint those on here. So this is an underpainting. I'm just trying to tint the paper with the undercolors that I see under the red apple. So I'm only working where there's some shadows right now. I don't want to work on the highlighted areas. I want to leave those pure white so I can have those show at the end. So like right here, there's a nice highlight on the picture. I don't want to get paint on that area. And then if I wanted to, I could add a little bit of warm colors right into here and let them blend in a little bit. So if I take and I add a little bit of orange, I just dripped on my painting. There we go. If I take orange, I'm going to put a little bit of that green into the orange. Like I said, I don't want to use anything straight out of the container. I want to make them look a little bit more natural and not so plasticky looking. So now I'm going to dry off my brush a little bit so I don't have a ton of water on there. And I can always swatch it on here, test my color. And I can add some of these oranges right into those greens while the orange is still a little bit wet, and they'll bleed into each other just a little bit. And then the next thing I want to do is start my cast shadow here. My apple is dry on the edge, so I can paint right next to it. So I think I'm going to start off with some kind of like bluish purples. So I'm getting a little purple and a little blue on my brush at the same time. I'm going to pull a little bit of this orange into it to dull it down. And now I can very carefully outline that cast shadow where it's the darkest right along the edge of the apple. And then I'm going to rinse off my brush. I'm drying it off by wiping it on the edge of the container. Yeah, a little bit drier. I don't want it to be too dry, but now I can pull this color out and just let it bleed out a little bit and let it soften. Because the cast shadow is definitely softer on the edge.